Captain Vex Cracknor stood on the bridge of his ship, the Bloodfang, admiring his reflection in the polished metal viewport. His forearms crossed in what he considered a menacing pose, his reptilian features twisted into what passed for a smile among his species. The Zephyrian pirate had earned his reputation the hard way by being absolutely ruthless and completely without mercy. Well, that and having really good marketing. Nothing strikes fear into the hearts of cargo haulers quite like a ship called Bloodfang, with skull decals and unnecessary spikes welded to the hull. "Captain," wheezed his second-in-command, Grix, a nervous creature that looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with an anxiety disorder. "We have a target on the long-range scanners." Vex's eyes lit up with the kind of predatory gleam that made insurance companies across 3 star systems raise their premiums. "What kind of target, my twitchy friend?" "Human cargo vessel, sir. Appears to be lightly armed. Minimal crew complement." Grix's mandibles clicked nervously. "The ship's designation is Lucky Strike." "Lucky Strike?" Vex let out a sound that could generously be called laughter but more accurately resembled a garbage disposal having an existential crisis. "Oh, the irony. Their luck just ran out. Now, you have to understand something about Captain Vex Cracknor. He had built his entire career on the assumption that humans were basically spacefaring toddlers. Soft, pink, easily frightened toddlers who had somehow stumbled into faster-than-light travel through sheer dumb luck. This wasn't entirely unfair, considering most of humanity's greatest discoveries had indeed been accidents. Penicillin, the microwave, and warp drive all shared the common origin story of oops, that wasn't supposed to happen. The Bloodfang was crewed by some of the most vicious cutthroats in the Andromeda sector. There was Skarn the Brutal, a 8-foot-tall beast whose idea of diplomacy involved creative uses of blunt objects. Zeta 9, a cybernetic assassin who had replaced so many body parts that philosophers debated whether she still qualified as organic life. And Grunk, whose species communicated primarily through violence and had never met a problem they couldn't solve by hitting it harder. These were beings who struck terror into the hearts of seasoned space marines, the kind of criminals who made hardened smugglers change course just to avoid being in the same star system. They had raided Galactic Navy convoys, plundered Merchant Guild treasure ships, and once held an entire moon for ransom. But humans were easy pickings. "Set an intercept course," Vex commanded, already mentally counting the credits he'd make selling whatever pathetic cargo these humans were hauling. "And someone polish my intimidation claws. I want to look properly menacing when we board their little toy ship." The Bloodfang changed course with the predatory grace of a space shark smelling blood in the vacuum. Its weapons systems powered up with satisfying hums and clicks. The crew began their pre-boarding ritual of sharpening various implements of destruction and practicing their most frightening battle cries. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly have known, was that they were about to encounter something far more dangerous than any weapon in the known galaxy. Something that had been the downfall of countless civilizations throughout Earth's history. Something that had driven the ancient Egyptians to worship it as a god, and modern humans to voluntarily become its servants. They were about to meet a cat. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. First, they had to actually catch the Lucky Strike, which was currently cruising through space with all the urgency of a Sunday afternoon stroll. The human ship showed no signs of panic, no desperate attempts to flee, no distress calls to the nearest patrol station. This should have been their first warning sign. Instead, Vex took it as confirmation of human stupidity. "Look at them," he sneered, watching the cargo ship maintain its leisurely pace. "They probably don't even know we're here. This is going to be easier than stealing candy from an Altarian slug baby." The Bloodfang closed the distance with predatory efficiency, its engines roaring with the kind of dramatic flair that Vex insisted upon. Because what was the point of being a feared space pirate if you couldn't make a proper entrance? As they approached weapons range, Vex opened a communication channel, his voice dripping with the kind of theatrical menace that had made him famous across 12 star systems. "Attention, human vessel. This is Captain Vex Cracknor of the Bloodfang. Prepare to be boarded. Resistance is futile, surrender is inevitable, and your day is about to get significantly worse." The response came back almost immediately, in a cheerful human voice that sounded like it was discussing the weather. "Oh, hey there, Bloodfang. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Lucky Strike. Sure thing, come on over. Fair warning, though, our security officer can be a bit cranky if you wake him up from his nap. Just thought you should know." Vex stared at the communication panel in confusion. This wasn't how terrified cargo captains were supposed to respond. Where was the pleading, the desperate offers of tribute, the existential dread? "Did he just invite us aboard?" Grix asked, his antennae twitching with uncertainty. "Apparently," Vex muttered, suddenly feeling like he'd missed something important. "And what's this about a security officer?" But his pride wouldn't let him back down now. Not in front of his crew. Not when his reputation was on the line. No matter, he declared, puffing out his chest scales. Whatever pathetic excuse for security these humans have cobbled together, we'll crush it like everything else. The Blood Fang locked onto the Lucky Strike with its boarding tubes, and the crew prepared for what they assumed would be the easiest raid of their careers. They were about to learn that assumptions, much like curiosity, could be very dangerous things indeed. The boarding tube connected with a satisfying clank that echoed through the Blood Fang. Vex straightened his armor, which was adorned with the skulls of his enemies and a few decorative ones he'd bought at a gift shop on Rigel Station. His crew assembled behind him, a collection of the galaxy's most wanted criminals, looking like they were heading to a particularly violent costume party. "Remember," Vex announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been defeated by anything smaller than a battlecruiser. "Humans are weak, cowardly, and completely unprepared for real violence. This should take maybe 5 minutes, 10, if they put up a fight." The airlock cycled open with a hiss, and the pirates stormed aboard the Lucky Strike with all the subtlety of a meteor impact. They expected screaming, panic, maybe some crying. What they got was Captain Jake Morrison, a middle-aged human in a faded jumpsuit, sipping coffee from a mug that read "Galaxy's Okayest Captain," and looking about as concerned as someone waiting for a delayed shuttle. "Oh hey, you made it," Jake said, raising his mug in greeting. "Welcome aboard the Lucky Strike. Coffee's fresh if anyone wants some. Elena just made a pot." Vex stopped so abruptly that Grunk crashed into him from behind, creating a brief but colorful alien pileup in the corridor. This wasn't in any of the pirate manuals. Where was the fear? The desperate bargaining? The inevitable begging for mercy? "I am Captain Vex Cracknor," he announced, drawing himself up to his full, impressive height. "Scourge of the spaceways, terror of the shipping lanes, the being whose very name makes cargo haulers wet themselves in fear." "Cool," Jake nodded approvingly. "I'm Jake. This is my ship. Nice to meet you." He took another sip of coffee. "So, you guys here for the cargo? Because I should probably warn you, our security officer gets really grouchy when people mess with his stuff." "Your security officer?" Vex scoffed, his confidence returning. "Humans and their pathetic attempts at intimidation. Where is this fearsome guardian?" "Oh, he's around somewhere," Jake said with the casual air of someone discussing the weather. "Probably napping. He takes his job very seriously, but he also takes his sleep schedule very seriously. I'd try not to wake him up if I were you. He can get a bit cranky." Elena Rodriguez, the ship's engineer, poked her head around the corner. She was a compact woman with grease stains on her coveralls, and the kind of expression that suggested she found the entire situation mildly amusing. "Jake, are these the pirates?" she asked, looking the boarding party up and down like she was evaluating a particularly unimpressive produce display. "Yep, these are our visitors," Jake confirmed. "I was just telling them about Mr. Whiskers." "Oh, they definitely don't want to mess with him," Elena agreed solemnly. "Remember what happened to those door-to-door vacuum salesmen from Alpha Centauri?" Jake winced theatrically. Poor guys never saw it coming. Vex's 4 eyes narrowed. This had to be some kind of psychological warfare, humans trying to make their security sound more impressive than it actually was. Well, he hadn't gotten where he was by falling for amateur intimidation tactics. "Enough games," he snarled, gesturing to his crew. "Secure the ship, find this security officer and neutralize him. And if anyone tries to resist, remind them why we're called the most feared pirates in the galaxy." His crew scattered through the ship with practiced efficiency, weapons drawn and ready for violence. The Lucky Strike wasn't particularly large, just a standard cargo hauler with the usual collection of cargoes, storage bays, and crew quarters. It should have been a simple matter to round up the humans and take control. It should have been, you know, Jake said conversationally, settling into a chair and putting his feet up. "I really should have mentioned this earlier, but Mr. Whiskers has some very strong opinions about strangers on his ship." "His ship?" Vex laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "This is your ship, human." "Oh no." Jake shook his head seriously. "I just work here. This is definitely Mr. Whiskers' ship. We're all just his crew. He allows us to stay because we're useful for opening cans and cleaning his litter box." Before Vex could respond to this obvious delusion, a crash echoed from the cargo bay, followed by some very creative cursing in 3 different alien languages. Then came another crash. And another. "Sounds like someone found him," Elena observed, not looking up from her tablet. "Found who?" Vex demanded, his confidence beginning to develop some troubling cracks. "Mr. Whiskers," Jake replied. "Our security officer." More crashes. More cursing. Then came a sound that made every pirate on the ship freeze in terror, not because it was particularly loud or threatening, but because it was so utterly unexpected in this context. Purring, loud, rumbling, unmistakably feline purring, echoing through the ship's ventilation system like some kind of organic engine. "What?" Vex asked slowly. "Exactly is your security officer?" Jake smiled, the kind of smile that suggested he was about to deliver news that would fundamentally alter someone's worldview. "He's a cat." The purring got louder. A 15-pound orange tabby cat named Mr. Whiskers, who takes his territorial instincts very, very seriously. In the distance, something that sounded suspiciously like Scarn the Brutal was screaming about a demon fluffball and begging for mercy. Vex stared at Jake for a long moment, processing this information. Then he started laughing. Not his usual menacing chuckle, but real, genuine laughter. "A cat," he wheezed. "You're trying to tell me that your security officer is a house pet?" "Yup," Jake nodded cheerfully. "And you expect me to believe that a small domestic animal is somehow a threat to my crew of hardened killers?" "Well," Elena said, looking up from her tablet, "believe it or not, but you might want to check on your guys. It's been suspiciously quiet for the last 30 seconds. As if on cue, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "Captain Vex," came Grix's voice, pitched higher than usual and trembling with what sounded like existential confusion. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" Vex demanded. "The kind that purrs, sir." What followed could only be described as a masterclass in feline warfare. Though calling it warfare would be giving it too much dignity. It was more like watching a natural disaster with whiskers and an attitude problem. Vex stormed through the corridors of the Lucky Strike, determined to see this supposed security officer for himself. What he found instead was Scarn the Brutal, all 8 feet of him pressed against a bulkhead, and staring at an empty corridor with the kind of wide-eyed terror usually reserved for cosmic horrors. "Scarn," Vex barked. "What's your status?" "Captain," Scarn whispered, his voice barely audible. "It's in the walls." "What's in the walls?" "The orange thing. It was there, then it wasn't, then it was behind me, then it knocked over a crate, then it disappeared again. I think it's toying with me, sir." Before Vex could respond, a flash of orange fur streaked past his peripheral vision, followed immediately by the sound of something expensive breaking in the next corridor. Then, silence. Then, purring. Then more breaking. "Grix, report!" Vex commanded into his comm. "Sir, I've lost visual contact with the target. It appears to be everywhere at once. Also, I'm trapped in a supply closet." "How did you get trapped in a supply closet?" "I don't know, sir. I was chasing the creature, then suddenly I was in here and the door won't open. There's cat hair on the handle." This was getting ridiculous. Vex turned to Jake, who was still sitting calmly with his coffee, occasionally wincing at particularly loud crashes. "What exactly is your pet doing to my crew?" "Oh, Mr. Whiskers isn't my pet," Jake corrected. "Nobody owns a cat, we just provide food and lodging in exchange for the privilege of existing in his space. And right now, I'd say he's probably doing what cats do best, which is being a complete agent of chaos while looking absolutely adorable doing it." As if summoned by the conversation, a fat orange tabby cat wandered into the corridor. He was exactly what you'd expect from a ship's cat. Well-fed, supremely confident, and radiating the kind of casual indifference that suggested he had never met a problem he couldn't solve by knocking it off a table. Mr. Whiskers looked at Vex with the kind of expression cats reserved for particularly slow humans. His yellow eyes conveyed a message that roughly translated to, "Oh, another one, how tedious." Then he sat down and began washing his paw. "That's it?" Vex stared at the cat in disbelief. "That's your security officer? That's what has my crew running scared?" Mr. Whiskers paused in his grooming to give Vex a look that clearly said, "Excuse me, do you mind? I'm trying to maintain my professional appearance here." "Don't let the cute act fool you," Elena called from her workstation. "He's a strategic genius, watch." As if on cue, the ship's lights flickered. Not because of any technical malfunction, but because Mr. Whiskers had somehow managed to brush against a control panel while appearing to do nothing more threatening than stretching. The momentary darkness was followed by a series of sounds that painted a very clear picture. Running feet, panicked shouting, something heavy falling over, and then Zeta-9's cybernetic voice echoing through the ship. "Systems compromised. Multiple contacts. Target is..." Wait, that's impossible. Sensor readings show the target is simultaneously in the cargo bay, the engine room, and directly behind me. How is that even... "Oh gods, it's in the vents!" Jake nodded approvingly. Classic Mr. Whiskers. He's got this whole ship mapped out in 3 dimensions. Every vent, every maintenance shaft, every gap between bulkheads. And cats, well, they're basically liquid when they want to be. "Liquid?" Vex repeated weakly. "Physics don't really apply to cats the way they do to other life forms," Elena explained matter-of-factly. "They exist in a quantum state of being simultaneously everywhere and nowhere until you need them for something. Then they're always in the other room. A new sound joined the symphony of chaos, the distinctive thud of someone running into a door that should have been open. "That'll be Grunk," Jake observed. "Mr. Whiskers has probably figured out the door controls by now. He's surprisingly good with buttons. Terrible at opening cans, though, which is why he keeps us around." "This is insane," Vex muttered, watching Mr. Whiskers stand up, stretch in that boneless way cats do, and then vanish around a corner with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested he had important cat business to attend to. "It's just a small mammal." "Sir!" Grix's voice crackled over the comm, now pitched so high it was barely audible. "I think I know how it's moving so fast. Enlighten me." "It's not one cat, sir. There have to be at least 6 of them. I've seen it in 3 different places in the last 30 seconds. There's only one cat on this ship," Jake said patiently. "You're just experiencing what we call the cat phenomenon. One cat can effectively be in multiple places at once through a combination of speed, stealth, and what scientists call feline physics." More crashes, more shouting. Then came a sound that made everyone freeze. Grunt's voice, but not his usual growling. He was making a sound that could only be described as cooing? "Oh no," Elena said, shaking her head. "Grunk's been compromised." "Compromised how?" Vex demanded. "Mr. Whiskers has deployed his ultimate weapon," Jake explained gravely. "He's being cute." Over the comm they could hear Grunk's voice, normally a terrifying bass rumble, now soft and wondering. "Little orange friend, are you hurt? Do you need food? You are very soft. Why do you make that rumbling sound?" "He's purring," Elena explained. "It's a psychological warfare technique. Cats have spent thousands of years perfecting the ability to make other species want to take care of them. It's remarkably effective." "Sir?" came another voice over the comm, this one belonging to a pirate whose name Vex couldn't remember. "The target has somehow gotten into the weapons locker. It's knocked over all the plasma rifles and is now sleeping on top of them." "How did it get past the security locks?" "Unknown, sir, but it appears to have left paw prints on the keypad." Vex looked around the corridor, which now resembled a disaster zone despite the fact that he hadn't actually seen the cat do anything more threatening than exist. His crew, the most feared pirates in the galaxy, were being systematically neutralized by what appeared to be a standard domestic cat with an attitude problem. "This has to be some kind of advanced human technology," he said desperately. "Some kind of biological weapon designed to look like a harmless pet." Jake and Elena exchanged glances. "Nope," Jake said cheerfully. "That's just cats. They're all like this. We brought Mr. Whiskers aboard because mice are a problem on long space voyages, and cats are the most efficient mouse elimination system ever developed. The fact that he's also an unintentional security system is just a bonus." "But how?" "Well," Elena said thoughtfully, "cats are basically tiny furry ninjas with no concept of personal boundaries, and an unshakable belief that everything in the universe belongs to them. Plus, they're nocturnal hunters who can see in the dark, move silently, and fit through any opening larger than their skull. Now imagine that creature suddenly finding a bunch of strangers in what it considers its personal territory." The ship's lights flickered again, and somewhere in the distance they could hear what sounded like someone begging for mercy in several alien languages. Mr. Whiskers reappeared at the end of the corridor, sitting perfectly still and watching the proceedings with the kind of calm satisfaction of a job well done. His tail twitched once, which Jake apparently recognized as some kind of signal. "Uh-oh," Jake said. "That's his 'I'm getting bored' tail twitch. When cats get bored, they tend to escalate things." "Escalate how?" Vex asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. As if in response, every light on the ship went out, plunging them into complete darkness. In the blackness they could hear the sound of something moving through the corridors, with impossible speed and precision. Then came the purring. Loud, resonant, and coming from everywhere at once. "Gentlemen," Jake's voice said calmly in the darkness, "I think Mr. Whiskers would like you to leave now." The emergency lighting kicked in after what felt like an eternity but was probably only 30 seconds. Vex found himself pressed against a bulkhead, his forearms wrapped around himself in what definitely wasn't a defensive posture because feared pirate captains don't adopt defensive postures. They adopt tactical assessment positions. There's a difference. Mr. Whiskers was sitting exactly where he'd been before the lights went out, grooming his paw with the kind of casual indifference that suggested he hadn't just terrorized an entire pirate crew in complete darkness. The only evidence of his nocturnal activities was the fact that somehow, in those 30 seconds, he'd managed to relocate 3 plasma rifles, 2 stun batons, and what appeared to be Skarn's favorite intimidation helmet. "How?" Vex whispered, staring at the cat with something approaching religious awe. "How did it do that?" Jake stretched and finished his coffee, apparently unbothered by the fact that his ship had just been turned into a feline hunting ground. "Do what? Move around in the dark? All cats can do that. They've got these things called tapetum lucidum behind their retinas, basically biological night vision. Plus, whiskers that can detect air currents and special changes. Mr. Whiskers can navigate this ship in complete darkness better than most of my crew can with full lighting. But the equipment. Vex gestured helplessly at the scattered weapons. He moved heavy military hardware. Oh, cats are way stronger than they look, Elena said, not glancing up from her tablet, where she appeared to be playing some kind of puzzle game. Pound for pound, they're incredibly powerful. Mr. Whiskers might look like a fluffy couch potato, but he can jump 6 times his own height and carry prey larger than himself. Your weapon's probably barely registered as a workout. Vex's worldview was beginning to crack like cheap armor under heavy fire. But this is impossible. No single creature could outmaneuver my entire crew. We're trained killers, hardened criminals, the scourge of 12 star systems. Yeah, about that, Jake said, his tone taking on the patient quality of someone explaining basic physics to a particularly slow child. You guys are thinking like apex predators, right? Big, scary, intimidating, all teeth and claws and dramatic entrances. Exactly, Vex nodded, grateful that someone finally understood. Well, that's your first mistake. See, cats aren't apex predators. There's something much more dangerous. More dangerous than apex predators? Oh, absolutely. Apex predators are specialists. They go after specific prey, in specific ways, in specific environments. They're powerful but predictable. Cats, on the other hand, are what we call mesopredators. Elena looked up from her game. Basically, they're the middle management of the food chain, which means they have to be twice as clever and 3 times as paranoid as anything above or below them. Think about it, Jake continued, warming to his subject. On Earth, cats have to deal with things bigger than them that want to eat them, things smaller than them that they want to eat, and things roughly the same size that compete with them for resources. So they evolved to be the ultimate opportunists. Mr. Whiskers, as if aware he was being discussed, stopped grooming and fixed Vex with a stare that seemed to see directly into his soul and find it wanting. They're ambush hunters, Jake explained. Patient, methodical, and absolutely ruthless when they decide to act. They can wait motionless for hours, then explode into action faster than most creatures can even perceive. And they never, ever fight fair. But he's so... Vex searched for the word. Small. Size is irrelevant to cats, Elena said matter-of-factly. They don't see the world in terms of big and small. They see it in terms of mine and also mine, and probably mine, but I'll let you think otherwise for now. Mr. Whiskers doesn't care that you're 3 times his size. This is his ship, you're in his territory, and you're messing with his stuff. As if to demonstrate the point, Mr. Whiskers stood up, stretched in that boneless way cats do, and walked directly toward Vex. The pirate captain found himself backing up despite himself, which was ridiculous because it was just a house pet. But there was something in those yellow eyes that suggested Mr. Whiskers was calculating exactly how much effort it would take to end him. The cat stopped just out of arm's reach and sat down, his tail curled neatly around his paws. Then he began to purr. Why is it making that sound? Vex asked nervously. Could be contentment, Jake said thoughtfully. Could be a threat display. With cats, purring can mean anything from I love you to I'm about to disembowel you, and everything in between. Context is everything. How do I know which one this is? Well, his ears are forward, his pupils aren't dilated, and his tail isn't lashing, so probably not immediate murder. But his whiskers are pointed forward, and he's maintaining direct eye contact, which suggests he's evaluating you as a potential threat. What should I do? Don't move suddenly. Don't stare directly at him. And whatever you do, don't try to pet him without permission. Permission? Cats have very strict rules about personal space and consent. Violate those rules and you'll discover exactly why ancient Egyptians worshipped them as gods of war. Mr. Whiskers tilted his head slightly, as if considering something important. Then he made a small chirping sound that somehow managed to convey both curiosity and mild disdain. He's talking to you, Elena translated. That's actually kind of an honor. Most cats ignore strangers completely. What's he saying? Roughly? Who are you? Why are you on my ship? And do you have food? Food. Everything comes back to food with cats. They're basically furry little survival machines optimized for finding, catching, and consuming calories. The fact that they're also perfect companions is just a happy accident of evolution. Jake stood up and walked over to a storage compartment, pulling out a small bag of what looked like brown pellets. Here, try this. Shake the bag. Vex took the bag uncertainly and gave it a tentative shake. The sound was apparently some kind of feline magic, because Mr. Whiskers immediately perked up, his ears swiveling forward, and his purring increasing in volume. Cat treats, Jake explained. The universal peace offering. Works better than any treaty in the known galaxy. You're saying I can negotiate with your security officer using snacks? Cats are remarkably reasonable once you understand their priorities, Elena said. Food, warmth, comfortable sleeping spots, and absolute territorial dominance. Meet those needs and they're perfectly happy to coexist peacefully. Mr. Whiskers stood up and took a step closer, his eyes fixed on the treat bag with laser-like intensity. His purring had taken on a distinctly expectant quality. He wants you to give him some, Jake coached. Just pour a few into your palm and hold it out. Let him come to you. Bex did as instructed, feeling somewhat ridiculous but also oddly honored. The cat approached cautiously, sniffed his hand, then delicately began eating the treats directly from his palm. The sensation was surprisingly pleasant. Tiny sandpaper tongue, warm breath, and the continued rumbling purr that seemed to vibrate through his entire arm. This is actually quite nice, Vex admitted. Yeah, cats have that effect on people, Jake nodded. It's part of their evolutionary strategy. Make themselves useful for pest control, then deploy weapons-grade cuteness to ensure long-term care and protection. Weapons-grade cuteness? Oh, you haven't seen anything yet. Wait until he starts doing the slow blink thing, or decides your lap looks like a good napping spot. Humans have been known to lose entire afternoons to sleeping cats. Mr. Whiskers finished the treats and looked up at Vex expectantly. Then, apparently deciding the pirate captain had passed some kind of test, he began rubbing against his legs, marking him with scent glands, and purring loudly enough to be heard throughout the corridor. Congratulations, Elena said dryly. You've been adopted. Adopted? He's claimed you as part of his crew now. You're officially under his protection, which means you're also under his authority. Hope you like following orders from a 15-pound dictator with a god complex. Vex looked down at Mr. Whiskers, who was now sitting on his feet and looking extremely pleased with himself. I think I'm beginning to understand why you humans are so successful in space. You've weaponized domestication itself. Every ship that encounters you doesn't just face your technology or your tactics. They face the psychological warfare of creatures specifically evolved to make other species want to take care of them. Jake grinned. Pretty much. Though to be fair, we didn't weaponize cats. Cats weaponized themselves and then decided we were useful enough to keep around. We just went along with it because honestly, have you ever tried to argue with a cat? From throughout the ship came the sound of his crew slowly emerging from whatever hiding places they'd found, their voices carrying a note of bewildered defeat that Vex had never heard before. Captain, Grix's voice came over the comm, still pitched higher than usual. I think we need to talk. What happened next would go down in pirate folklore as either the most humiliating defeat in galactic history or the most brilliant tactical withdrawal, depending on who was telling the story and how much they'd had to drink. Vex's crew began trickling back to the main corridor, and it was immediately obvious that they had been through some kind of life-changing experience. Skarn the Brutal was carrying his helmet in one hand and what appeared to be a small ball of yarn in the other, his 8-foot frame somehow managing to look sheepish. Zeta 9's usually pristine cybernetic components were covered in orange cat hair, and her optical sensors kept twitching as if she were still scanning for threats that moved too fast to track. But it was Grunk who had been most thoroughly defeated. The massive alien warrior, whose species communicated primarily through violence and had never met a problem they couldn't solve by hitting it harder, was cradling something small and orange against his chest and making soft cooing sounds. Grunk, Vex called out. Report. Grunk looked up with the kind of beatific expression usually reserved for religious epiphanies. Captain, he rumbled in his bass voice, the small orange warrior has chosen me. Chosen you for what? I do not know, but it is warm and makes pleasant vibration sounds. I think I am to be its guardian now. Vex looked closer and realized that Grunk was holding a second cat, a smaller orange kitten that was purring contentedly against the alien's massive chest. Where did that come from? Vex demanded. Oh, that's Nugget, Jake said casually. Mr. Whisker's son. He's been exploring the ship. Probably wanted to meet the visitors. There are 2 of them? Actually, there are 5 cats on this ship, Elena said, not looking up from her tablet. Mr. Whiskers, Nugget, Princess Fluffybutt, Admiral Snuggles, and Captain Biscuits. They're a family unit. As if summoned by their names, 3 more cats appeared from various hiding spots around the corridor. Princess Fluffybutt was a sleek black cat with white paws who moved with the kind of predatory grace that made professional assassins look clumsy. Admiral Snuggles was a massive gray tabby whose bulk suggested he took his food duties very seriously, and Captain Biscuits was a tiny tortoiseshell with enormous green eyes and the kind of innocent expression that usually preceded something expensive getting broken. 5 cats, Vex repeated weakly. You have 5 cats providing security for this ship. Well, technically they provide pest control, Jake corrected. The security thing is just a side effect of their territorial instincts and complete inability to understand that other creatures might have rights. Mr. Whiskers, apparently deciding that the situation had progressed enough, stood up from his position on Vex's feet and issued what could only be described as a command meow. It was sharp, authoritative, and carried the unmistakable tone of someone who expected to be obeyed immediately. The other cats responded instantly. Princess Fluffybutt vanished into the shadows with liquid grace. Admiral Snuggles positioned himself to block the corridor leading to the engine room. Captain Biscuit somehow managed to get behind the pirates without anyone seeing her move. And Nugget, still purring in Grunk's arms, began kneading his massive claws against the alien's armor with the kind of innocent affection that could easily puncture environmental suits. "I think," Jake said thoughtfully, "Mr. Whiskers has decided he's bored with this game." "What game?" Vex asked. Though he was beginning to suspect, he didn't want to know the answer. The let the strangers think they have a chance game. It's a classic cat move. They let their prey feel confident, maybe even successful, right up until the moment they decide playtime is over. Mr. Whiskers sat down in the center of the corridor and began the kind of thorough grooming session that cats use to demonstrate their complete indifference to lesser creatures. But his ears were forward, his muscles were coiled, and there was something in his posture that suggested a predator getting ready to spring. "Captain," Grix whispered, pressing himself against the bulkhead. "I don't like the way it's looking at us." "He's not looking at you," Elena observed. "He's calculating vectors, timing, and probable escape routes. Cats are natural physicists when it comes to hunting. They can judge distances, angles, and momentum better than most targeting computers." "But we're not prey," Vex protested. "To a cat, everything is either prey, predator, or furniture," Jake explained. "And right now, you're acting like prey." As if to demonstrate the point, Skarn made the mistake of trying to edge toward the exit. The movement was subtle, barely perceptible, but Mr. Whiskers' head snapped toward him with laser precision. The cat's pupils dilated slightly, his ears flicked back, and his tail began the kind of slow lashing that preceded pouncing. "Don't move," Jake said quietly. "When cats do that tail thing, they're locked onto a target." "What tail thing?" Skarn asked, freezing in place. "The death twitch. See how it's moving, slow and deliberate? That means he's calculating the perfect moment to strike." Mr. Whiskers continued his grooming, but now it had the quality of a ritual preparation. Each lick was precise, methodical, and somehow deeply ominous. "This is ridiculous," Zeta 9 declared, her cybernetic voice cutting through the tension. "It's a small mammal. I am a precision-killing machine with enough firepower to level a city block." She reached for her weapon. What happened next occurred so fast that even the ship's security cameras couldn't capture it properly. One moment, Zeta 9 was drawing her plasma rifle. The next, she was flat on her back, with Mr. Whiskers sitting on her chest, purring loudly and kneading her armor with claws that somehow found every gap in her cybernetic plating. "Hal," she whispered, staring up at the cat in disbelief. "Cats can accelerate from 0 to 30 miles per hour in about 3 seconds, Elena explained helpfully. "Also, they have this thing called a righting reflex that lets them land on their feet from any angle, plus claws that can grip almost any surface, and a complete lack of understanding about the concept of impossible." Mr. Whiskers chirped once, a sound that somehow conveyed both satisfaction and mild disappointment. Then he began head-bonking Zeta 9's faceplate with the kind of aggressive affection that could probably dent reinforced steel. Is he trying to mark me?" the cyborg asked weakly. "Scent marking is how cats claim ownership," Jake nodded. "Congratulations. You now belong to Mr. Whiskers." "I don't want to belong to anyone." "Yeah, cats don't really care about consent when it comes to adoption. You're part of his collection now." One by one, the other cats began moving. Not attacking exactly, but repositioning themselves with the kind of casual confidence that suggested the outcome had already been decided. Princess Fluffybutt appeared behind Skarn and began winding around his legs, purring loudly enough to be heard 3 decks away. Admiral Snuggles simply sat down in front of the airlock, effectively blocking the only exit with his considerable bulk. "They're hurting us," Grix observed with the kind of horrified fascination usually reserved for natural disasters. "Cats are excellent at hurting," Elena agreed. "They use a combination of positioning, timing, and psychological pressure to control the movement of other creatures. It's basically military tactics, but with more purring." Captain Biscuits, meanwhile, had somehow gotten into the weapons locker again, and was systematically knocking plasma rifles onto the floor, each one landing with a metallic clang that seemed to echo with finality. "Stop her," Vex commanded. "You stop her," Jake shrugged. "She's got that kitten energy thing going on. Trying to stop a kitten from doing kitten things is like trying to argue with physics. Technically possible, but you're not gonna like the results. Mr. Whiskers dismounted from Zeta 9's chest and padded over to Vex, fixing him with that unsettling stare that seemed to see directly into his soul. The purring had stopped, which somehow made the silence more ominous than any threat display. "What does he want?" Vex asked quietly. "I think," Jake said thoughtfully, "he wants you to make a decision." "What kind of decision?" "The kind where you acknowledge that this is his ship, you're just visiting, and you'd like to leave with your dignity intact." Mr. Whiskers tilted his head and made a small, questioning sound that somehow managed to convey the message. "Well? Are we going to do this the easy way, or the fun way?" "The fun way involves a lot more running and screaming," Elena added helpfully. "And probably some property damage." Vex looked around at his crew. Grunk was still cradling Nugget and looked like he'd rather face a squadron of battle cruisers than give up his new furry friend. Zeta 9 was covered in cat hair and seemed to be having some kind of existential crisis about the effectiveness of her targeting systems. Skarn was trying to untangle himself from Princess Fluffybutt without success, and Grix appeared to be in the early stages of a nervous breakdown. "We surrender," Vex announced. Mr. Whiskers purred once, a sound of deep satisfaction, and rubbed against Vex's legs in what could generously be called approval. 20 minutes later, the most feared pirates in the Andromeda sector were shuffling back to their ship like scolded children. Grunk had to be physically separated from Nugget, a process that involved considerable negotiation and a promise that he could visit again if he brought proper tribute, in the form of premium cat treats. "This never happened," Vex announced to his crew as they sealed the airlock behind them. "Sir," Grix said quietly, "there's orange cat hair all over our equipment. I said this never happened. The cybernetic logs show. Delete them." But word had a way of getting around in the pirate community, especially when it involved the galaxy's most notorious criminals being defeated by house pets. Within a week, every smuggler's den, black market station, and criminal hideout from here to the Magellanic Clouds was buzzing with the story. The Lucky Strike continued its route unmolested. Pirates would scan the ship, detect the human crew signatures, and then mysteriously develop urgent business elsewhere. Some claimed they could hear purring through the vacuum of space. Others swore they'd seen glowing eyes in the viewports. Jake never bothered to correct the rumors. Neither did Elena. Whiskers, for his part, settled back into his most important duty, sleeping in the captain's chair for 18 hours a day and judging the crew's performance with the kind of stern disapproval that kept everyone on their toes. And somewhere in the depths of space, Vex Cracknor was explaining to potential recruits that his crew didn't raid human ships anymore due to advanced security protocols. He never mentioned that the protocols had whiskers and a tendency to knock things off tables. After all, a pirate has to maintain some dignity, even if it's been thoroughly shredded by a 15-pound orange tabby who takes his nap schedule very, very seriously.